Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good night, wherever you guys are. Um, Let me introduce, uh, welcome to our monthly presentation series. We're gonna have this presentation series once every month, right here, same channel, same station. And before we get to talking about our speaker tonight, we just want to do a couple quick housekeeping items. Um, First thing that we need to talk about is where, who are we and what do we stand for? Um, Rochelle?
Yes.
Should I stop sharing, Rochelle, so you can share your screen on anything?
No, I'm not gonna share my screen. I guess, thank everybody for coming in. We are a doctoral program, support group. We started about 4 or 5 years ago and supporting one another to get through the doctoral journey. It's originally, like, I believe it's 6 of us who's part of the leadership team. And our whole goal is to provide resources and support to all and any African descent students, doctoral learners at GCU. And so we're open to everybody. There's no restrictions. And we just want, if possible, if you can share us with other groups, tell other groups about us, and know that we're here to support you. If you have anything that you need for us to provide you, please, we're here available for you. And that's the whole purpose of our group, is just to provide support for one another.
Okay. Thank you, Rochelle. Um, just want to talk a little bit about what we do. One of the things that we have been distributing is our web app, and our web app is designed to have us communicating what's going on and what are the things that we're going to be doing to help doctoral students through this process. We've been sending out messages, but we want to make sure that people are actually receiving those messages. And just a quick show of hands, has anyone utilized the apps thus far? Anyone that's on the group tonight?
I have not received an email on that.
Okay. So then what we will do is we'll be following up at the end of this presentation. If you don't mind putting your email in the chat so that we can send you the email link, because we were sending some really wonderful Christmas greetings and New Year's greetings, Martin Luther King. So we're going to be sending a lot of different motivational things and information as we get it, with some of the changes that the institution is going to be letting us know about what's going on. And I see Donald is coming online. So Donald will tell you a little more about the app. I was just starting the process.
Well, good evening, everyone. So the app is a great resource. I apologize for being a little bit late, but the app is a very good resource for you to be able to connect to. Your guys are good. To be able to connect with the group specifically, but also it'll allow you to have access to our members only section, which basically allows for you to be able to access more events that we have with the doctoral with our group, as well as give you an opportunity to interact with different videos or other resources that we will put up as a group for all of us to elevate and rise together. But it is a good way to just stay connected, to get all the updates. We send out meeting alerts for meetings, and it just gives you an opportunity to be able to just be connected and stay connected to the group.
Okay, thank you, Donald. The other thing that will also happen is we will be sending out a weekly newsletter. So all of the things that we post during the week will come out in a weekly newsletter. So look in your email to see that. Some people have given us their GCU emails. Whatever email that you give to us, please pay attention to that email so that you will see information coming to you from us. Well, at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Terila Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the group's official GCU advisor, GCU faculty advisor. And saying that, we would like Dr. Johnson to tell you a little bit about herself and start the presentation.
All
Dr.
right,
Johnson.
so I'm gonna try to do this in 5 minutes or less. So hello, everybody. I am Dr. Terila Johnson. I'm actually alum of GCU. I got my doctorate here. I graduated in October 2020 with a DBA. So I always say, if there's any DBAs here, make sure you put something in the chat so I can shout you out, because we are small but mighty. There's not a whole lot of us. But our dissertation and the template is exactly the same as those who get an EDD and a DBA, which was part of the reason why I chose GCU, because when you go and you get DBAs elsewhere, you don't have a dissertation and you don't get the research basis of it. And so what I wanted to be able to do is get between the academic space and the business space. And so I've been able to do that since I've been here. In addition to me being an alum, I've also been a part of GCU as staff for a little over 10 years now. It'll be 11 years coming this August, and 12 years in my 10 years in my current role next year. So I've been around for quite some time. So I've occupied multiple spaces. I've always been in the doctoral college. I started as one of the individuals that you would talk to when you expressed interest in GCU. I moved over into a student services role, and my current role is research faculty manager. So the long and short story of what I do now is, when things go wrong in the dissertation phase and people get unhappy, that includes both students and faculty, my job is to come in and look at what the problems are, see what we can do to help things move forward, and also, in whatever sense that I can, help folks understand the realities of the process. In addition to that, I've been in higher ed. It'll be, let me think about this. I think I'm going upwards of 15 years now at multiple institutions. I am in doctoral education in other spaces besides GCU, and so I'm pretty well-rounded in that regard. And so this group reached out to me, I think it was early part of last year, and asked me to be their advisor, and I jumped right on it. So what I am happy to see is we have a little bit of diversity here, because although this group is an African-American student group, it is professional development. And so one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is, what can we do to not only represent ourselves within the college as students and faculty, but what can we give to represent GCU students as a whole in the doctoral college? Because regardless of what your ethnicity is, getting a doctorate is hard for everybody, and we all have similar experiences. What I'm presenting today is not coming from a space of not having experienced what you experienced. I got frustrated as a student. I got angry as a student. My chair and I had gridlock moments as a student. My chair and I had arguments as a student. I got unhappy about AQR. I got unhappy at just about everything. And the interesting part about being an alum is now I actually am an AQR reviewer. And so what I tried to do is bring some of those realities back into the space, but we also are a Christian institution. And so we do believe heavily in human flourishing. And just because you get frustrated or you have some experiences and emotions does not mean that you cannot flourish through them. Actually, they're designed for you to be able to flourish through them, including your negative emotions. So I want to start there for just a little bit. Even if you have a negative emotion, if you believe that you are an image bearer, that emotion comes from God. What happens is unfortunately, we have this other part of ourselves called sin, and that's when things get a little crazy, right? But that doesn't mean that these negative emotions that you sense and feel are not for a particular purpose. We all get anxious. Some of us get anxious for different reasons to a different extent, but that anxiety has a purpose in it. We all get frustrated about things, but frustration is not something that's supposed to hold you back. It's supposed to be something that's supposed to cue that there's some sign that something needs to change, right? So you're all here. You have never written a chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in a dissertation before. This is all new for you. You've never been through AQR before. This is new to you. You've never gotten a doctorate before. This is all new to you. And so you be kind to yourself in recognizing that this is all new, including dealing with the emotions. They also have a learning curve. So what the student leaders asked me to do was to come and talk a little bit about AQR, what it is, what's its purpose, and how you can actually thrive through it. All right, so you have 2 times that you're going to go through AQR, one at your proposal phase, and the second time you're going to go through it is at your dissertation phase. And so one of the things that I often hear in my space quite frequently is sometimes students feel that feedback is either conflicting or it's vague or they don't quite understand what's going on. And so I am a basketball fan. I don't get to watch it as much as I used to, but I always liken the dissertation process to the San Antonio Spurs, who used to beat the socks off some of everybody because they knew basketball fundamentals and they mastered it, right? Wasn't that they had more talent and skill than anybody, but the basic fundamentals of the game, they mastered them, and that is how they got their edge. And so one of the things that I say about our templates is it's the fundamentals of the journey. GCU is one of the spaces that gives you a template, and not only a template for what you should do, there's information in there on why you should do it and how you should actually do it, but you don't understand it. So full transparency, it took me 6 months to understand what the heck a background of the study was, what a background of the problem was, how they were similar and how they were different. And then once I gained an understanding, the next step of that was, how do you write that? What do you put in it? What kind of words do you use? What does the paragraph look like? All of these things were new, right? And so the hard part about getting a doctorate is it is one time besides parenting and marriage that you feel like you have no idea what you are doing all the time. I mean, literally all the time. Every class I got anxious, like I was starting the process all over again. And it's going to happen until the dean actually signs it. So what I want you to know is what you're feeling and what you're sensing is actually normal. There's nothing wrong with you. And the only people who are going to understand it is people who have been here before doing it and those who are in it with you. So we have 2 purposes in AQR. We do look at methodology, but we're not the first time we look at methodology, because if you look at the criteria, those rubrics that are at the end of each section, just recognize the fact that that first column in there says learner score. So you are actually your first level of peer review. You're self-assessing yourself. And so when you look at those criteria, it's good for you to try to understand what they mean and why. And one of the things I've said to students quite a bit is, just like there's experts in things like leadership and education, there are also experts out in some of the spaces that you have to do to write. So doing Google searches and trying to find information to understand those key aspects of it is good. But that methodological stuff that you see in those criteria, these are what we would consider the basic parts of research knowledge. It's the basics of what you're supposed to know with research. So that's the fundamental piece of it. The second thing that we look at in AQR is we are looking for alignment. Now, raise your hand if someone says to you it's not aligned. That's still confusing. It's all right. Safe space. Thank you, Mrs. Porter. It's okay. Safe space. We don't learn anything here. If we don't talk about it. I remember when people used to say alignment to me, I would get frustrated because I'm like, what is that? What are you talking about? Right? An alignment is not only consistency in wording, but it is the basic core connection between everything that you're putting in there. So a qualitative descriptive study has a language to it. Case studies have a language. Narrative inquiries have a language. Qualitative versus quantitative, they have a language. Everything has a vocabulary to it. And so you have to try to understand those things. So when we talk about alignment, we're talking about the basis between those things. The other thing that we're looking at is it meeting minimum standards? And the bare minimum standard is set forth in the criteria. So those are 2 things that we look at. moving over into the dissertation phase, for those of you who are here who have been through AQR at level 2, that's what we call it right now, and that's the proposal phase, you know that there's 3 outcomes that you can come out with when you go through level 2. You can be approved. That means you have a pretty good set of chapters 1, 2, and 3 that you can move forward, defend your proposal, and move into our IRB. Or you can be approved with conditions, meaning it's just okay, but there's some things that need to be worked on until you get to dissertation. Or it could be that you weren't approved to move forward and there's some revisions that are required. So those are the 3 things that you can expect there. Now, I'm going to ask the folks that are here that have been through AQR, did you get anxious when you experienced that? Yep.
Most definitely.
Did you get emotional when you experienced that? Did you get frustrated when you experienced that? Did you feel like you want to quit multiple times when you've experienced that? One of my learners and I, we call it quit attacks. When she texts me, she's like, I'm having a quit attack, and we have to walk through the quit attack. So it's normal. But in the dissertation phase, it builds. So think about it this way. A full dissertation is chapters 1 through 5. The proposal is a part of chapters 1 through 5. So they all have a connection, right? So when you get to level 5 in dissertation, we are building upon what's there. So let's say, for example, you told us you were going to do a thematic analysis in chapter 3, and you were going to use Braun and Clark. And all of a sudden, in chapter 4, we see Saldana, which it happens, right? It does. It happens. But you have to give us a reason why you decided to switch. You start talking about coding. Braun and Clark has a vocabulary when they talk about coding. Saldana has a vocabulary. So you start mixing them. And then we're like, wait a minute. You said you were going to do this. Did you do this or this, right? So there's a build upon that. But the whole point of it is to look at it and, quite frankly, see what's in there that is good and what's in there that's not good so that you can put a good product out. The next thing that a lot of students don't realize that we're doing, it is a collaborative effort. A lot of times students think I have to do what the reviewer is telling me to do. And this is why we want to move into a more professional development type of mindset, because it is collaborative. Yes, you have another person coming in, looking at things and telling you where things need to be done better, but that is in collaboration with you and your committee and what you've done, right? So the more you understand about this part of the process, you can become a collaborator in that particular aspect of it. It just depends on how you see it and how you engage that particular part of the process. The other thing is that part in level 5 or the dissertation phase in AQR, we are also helping you get prepared for your final defense. It's different when you have to write about the research that you did as opposed to talking about the research that you did. A lot of times too, I want to kind of park here for just a little bit. This middle piece, you have been in this process of revising, right? Getting a review, revising, getting a review. And that gets to be normal for you. Now, when it's time to start defending, you have to move into something different where you're not necessarily writing, you're demonstrating verbally what you know based on what you've done. All right, so here we're going to come here. In AQR, we work to ensure that what you are putting forth is clear. Clear in terms of methodology, clear in terms of alignment, clear in terms of, did you really collect the data that you really needed to collect to address those research questions concerning those people within that context that you did the research in? We also help prepare you for success. And so we do have a set of institutional standards, but one of the things I say to people is once you have that DR in front of your name, people just expect you to know things. It's the weirdest thing in the world. People just expect me to know stuff. And when I say I don't know, in some instances, they look at me like, are you sure you don't know? Because it puts that much rigor on your mind and what you're capable of doing. And so it also helps you to achieve one of the most significant academic goals that you can probably make. We also mitigate risk. So a part of our job is looking for potential risk. I'll give an example. let's say, for example, you've put your research questions together and you put 2 different people groups in your research question, which can imply that you have 2 different samples that you're looking at. Well, let's say, for example, you said, I am going to look at female soldiers and male soldiers. What happens if you don't get enough recruitment in terms of one side over the other? You may not get the data that you need for the research questions on one side or the other. That's a risk. So our job is to look at that and say, hey, are you sure you want to go down this path? Because what if you don't get enough female folks to respond, but you get an overage of male, you won't have enough data. That could become an issue. You see where I'm going? Let's say, for example, and I had this happen one time, a long time ago, a student was on the phone with me frustrated because they literally thought to recruit that they were going to go to parking lots and stick flyers in people's windows. And the chair was like, no, that's not feasible. And the student was like, yes, it is. And we had to have a conversation. How is that feasible? How are you going to physically get up every day and go and stick flyers in people's windshields? And raise your hand if you ever participated in some sort of research because somebody stuck a flyer in your windshield. Right? So little things like that. The other thing that it does, and I want to talk a little bit about this because I didn't realize I had this until post-graduation, but it did develop my emotional intelligence and problem-solving skills. So now as a chair, as a content expert in my regular role, and as an AQR reviewer, I have the capacity to kind of step out of a situation and take a look and see what are these different perspectives and how can I come in and say, okay, we all share the same perspective on these. This is where we agree. This is where we have some differences. Now let's try to find a middle of the bridge somewhere so that we can get to where we need to get to. So it does help with that as well. All right. So leaders, I am not counting my slides. Where am I? I don't think this is 6. Nope. Okay, it's not. Sorry. Oh, all right. So emotional reactions. So some of the common feelings that you can experience is frustration, anxiety, and doubt. The reason I'm asking for my leaders to kind of pay attention, because as I said, this is going to be activity-based. They're going to start engaging you here in the chat in just a little bit. And this is for you. You are going to get frustrated. You are going to get anxious. You are going to have doubts, not only in yourself, but you're going to have doubts in the journey. So these types of emotions, they can have an impact on your motivation. So sometimes it would be difficult for you to move forward. And if you think about it just a little bit, the benefits to this is they have a capacity to sharpen your focus and critical thinking. So if you get frustrated, just recognize, one, that something needs to change, and you may not know what that is just yet. So if you take a step back from it and try to figure out what is it that needs to be changed and how you're going to move forward to get those changes to happen, whether this is having some sort of conversation with your committee. And in this particular case, if you get feedback from an AQR reviewer in the AQR process, how can you engage your chair to start talking about the possibility of engaging them or getting a better understanding of what that feedback is? The second thing that can happen in the journey is you can be assured, and I don't know if you've experienced this or recognized it yet, but a level of mental resilience. So if you just started your journey and you think about it, you didn't have the capacity to sit and read through articles and revise as quickly as you do now. Your ability to bounce back now is most likely much further along than what it was towards the beginning. You also get a better capacity of being able to manage deadlines. And when you have feedback that's going back and forth and evolving. And so in this also can give you an opportunity to be able to manage your emotions more constructively. So I remember one of the times that I got extremely frustrated in my journey with my chair, and I had to take a step back and try to find a positive and healthy way of moving forward. And in doing that, I carried that experience and those techniques into my everyday life. So it came off into other spaces as well. And then psychological preparation. There is crying that happens in dissertation. Don't know about anybody else, but I have plenty of crying spells. It happens, right? But the psychology of it, you get, psychologically stronger as you go. Another thing that it has the capacity to do is promote your self-awareness. And again, just your problem solving skills. All right, so let's pause for a second here. And this is where the leaders will start to engage you in the chat. So what I want you all to do is go to the chat. And the leaders that are here is Russell, Vicky, Rochelle, Gwen, and Donald. And you'll see about every minute or so, they're going to post some questions in there. So Vicky posted the first question. And I know that everybody here is getting their doctorate. And so you're used to revising and trying to have the perfect answer. And this is a safe space. There is no such thing as the perfect answer. You just be yourself. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, you guys. Good job. Couple more minutes to reflect. Good stuff, you guys. One more minute. All right, you have more to share on those questions, please feel free to do so. Dr. Evans, want to recap what came out in the chat for us?
Yes, I'm just somewhat verbal, and
Okay.
I think it was quite a bit that was expressed, and I've seen that the feedback can be emotionally challenging yet beneficial. So, but what was highlighted was the fact that people felt frustrated, anxious, there was doubt, there was a lack of understanding of the process itself.
Okay.
And I think people said that they were able to go back and refocus after they were able to get some of their emotions under control. They were able to go back, refocus, reconstruct the way that they were handling AQR, and was able to consult with their chair.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. So before we move forward here for just a little bit, part of the reason why I started here with pause and reflect is because that is actually important for you to be able to do in general, but especially in the dissertation process when you get emotional. If you can name the emotion, usually you can deal with it, right? So if you're able to put a name to it, you usually can deal with it. But if you can't put a name to it, that makes it a little bit difficult for you to be able to deal with it. One of the emotions that is often experienced in getting a doctorate is ambivalence. This, you know what I mean? I don't really know where I want to go, or why I'm not 100% sure if I want to do this. And that happens a lot when things are uncertain. One of the things that you can also do is reframe the feedback. One thing that is really beneficial now that I didn't have in my journey is we have AI. So there's even some times where I give feedback in other spaces of my life and I don't get it, right? Something about it is unclear, or maybe I am misinterpreting that feedback or misunderstanding it, or I got a little too emotional about it to really understand what that person is trying to say to me. And so one of the things that I did in my journey was I would analyze the feedback from my committee and the AQR reviewer, very similar to how I would analyze trying to understand aspects of the template, as well as trying to understand aspects of my methodology, my design, my data collection processes, how I was going to analyze my data. And what ended up happening is when I began to break that stuff down, it gave me the option to be able to do the second piece of it, which is reframe the feedback. So if you see the feedback as an opportunity for learning, as opposed as to an attack on you, that makes the world of a difference. And that's difficult because when you're getting a doctorate, it's almost like having a whole nother job, right? So you are losing time with yourself, you're losing time with your spouses, your family, your kids, you're missing out on quite a bit. And you work really, really hard to get this done. And so that personal feeling is always going to be there. But if you can take that step back from it and realize that it's not personal, it's something intended to sharpen you and to help you move forward, that usually works out really, really well. Leveraging support networks, spaces like this, coming in and being able to talk in healthy spaces. I actually said this to the leaders. When I was in my journey, I was very careful about who I was around in my journey. Meaning, if you had a capacity to be the unhappy doctoral student that was always complaining and not trying to find a way forward, they didn't get much space for me. That doesn't help me if I'm already unhappy, right? And I'm in this space of other people who are consistently unhappy and there's no forward movement in it. And so, yes, venting is okay. But when it comes to a point where you start to co-brood, which is a real thing, you can't get anywhere, right? So if it's, I'm frustrated about this, and then there's conversation about trying to understand it better and moving forward together, that's one thing. The other spaces that we have plenty of office hours and meetings. If you go to DC Network and you look at the calendar, there are so many things on there that you can take part in. And then finally down here, this embracing ambiguity. So we're going to move into that here in just a little bit. But ambiguity is really this space where things are uncertain. And there's a possibility that expectations could change. They are changing, or you're perceiving them as changing. All right. So the different types of ambiguity. There is linguistic ambiguity. So more often than not, you don't talk to your AQR reviewer. Sarah's here. She let me know that I'm her AQR reviewer. This is her first time seeing me or talking to me, right? All she got was what I put down in words. And so she doesn't know me. So she doesn't know that, Sarah, I genuinely do take as much time as I possibly can to nice up my comments because I don't want them to come off a certain way. But there's sometimes you just have to be direct. If you nice it up too much, then you pay attention to a lot of language in there that doesn't even make a difference. The student needs something that they can do to move forward. But then also the problem with linguistic ambiguity is that it can be interpreted in multiple ways. So I'm a chair. I have methodologists that I work with, and I have content experts that I work with, and I have AQR reviewers that I work with. And there have been times that my learners have gotten feedback. I interpret it one way, right? Methodologist thinks one thing, my student thinks another. Now we're all in these three different spaces about what this means. And how do we move forward to make sure we understand exactly what the reviewer or whoever is trying to say? Situational ambiguity. This happens when expectations or requirements are unclear or evolving. So let's say, for example, which true story for me, I did a case study and I didn't have a really good understanding of triangulation. So I kept trying to fight everybody when they said that your third data source needs to be interviews and focus groups with the students. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm telling the truth. I don't want to do that. I talk to students all day. I hear from students all day. I want to focus on the chairs. But the problem is I did not have an understanding of what I was supposed to be doing. So that lack of understanding about what's required of me, my own emotions, right? And what everybody else is telling me to do, this is creating some situational ambiguity. How do you navigate through that? Cognitive ambiguity, which you guys already highlighted. You have never gotten a doctorate before. You have never experienced a template with rubric criteria in it where you have to score yourself. You've never had to write about how the problem evolved over time and became the current problem. You've never had to do that, right? And so this gap in your knowledge and understanding of what needs to be done and the standards or methods of doing research, that can create some ambiguity. Now think about having all three of those at one time and how overwhelming that feels. So in this is where feedback can become vague, right? Vague maybe because the feedback actually is vague, or vague because you are experiencing ambiguity up in these top three areas in one way or another. So how do we get through this? How do we develop the tolerance for ambiguity? So pardon me, I'm going to come back over into my research bench here for just a second. But my theoretical foundations in my dissertation were design thinking, research self-efficacy, and Hershey and Blanchard's coaching model. So if I were to be able to combine all of those together, design thinking, depending on which model you use, I use Stanford, but in design thinking, you empathize based on needs, and then you define problems based on those needs. Once you define those problems based on those needs, you come up with ideas to be able to move it forward. Once you come up with those ideas, you prototype those ideas, and then you test them. So that's probably like, what does that have to do with dissertation? Well, design thinkers, we have a tolerance for ambiguity. It's a part of our temperament and makeup. We thrive in ambiguous spaces. The more uncertain and the more unknown it is, we thrive in it. Well, guess what? A tolerance for ambiguity is also a temperament of a researcher. The research actually says that you need both of those to be a researcher. So when things are unclear and uncertain, we should get excited about that and try to find ways through that. And so I never forget the day that God told me, you need to fall in love with the hard parts of the journey. All that hard stuff, you need to fall in love with it. Because if you fall in love with it, you become interested and you start researching it. So I was the nerdy dissertation kid, literally, where I would sit around and do things like, what does a good scholarly paragraph look like? How many sentences? How many lines will it take to get there? Right? Like I was that student. And I want to talk to people about that stuff. And they'd look at me and be like, are you kidding me? But it was also my job to do it. But that was me falling in love with the hard parts of it. So much so I'll never forget the day that I looked at an article and it was a perfect paragraph on telling us what was known and what was not known. It was the perfect paragraph. And I was like, oh, that paragraph is great. So I took the paragraph and I modeled it in one section of my review of the literature. And then I tested it. See what I just did? I tested it out. My chair looked at it and she was like, that is an amazing paragraph. Where'd you get that? And I told her. She's like, take all your other paragraphs in here and make them look like this for this criteria, right? Then other strategic questions that needed to be asked. There were times I just got unclear feedback. I was under version 8 of the template. So under version 8 of the template, in chapter 1, there was this space where it talked about you had to describe the phenomena that was being explored. I kept getting a 1 from the methodologist. Just kept getting a 1. By the time I got over it with the methodologist, when the AQR reviewer looked at it, because they're with fresh eyes, they see something else, but they're like, your phenomena is not really described well. That's vague. How? Why? What's good about it? What's not so good about it, right? A emotional response will be to email my chair. I don't understand this feedback. What I did was take a step back, assess what I knew, right? Assess what I don't know, and then talk to folks about how to fill in those gaps. Focus on what you can control. You cannot control your AQR reviewer. You can't, no matter how you try. You can't. You can't control your committee. You just can't. You can't control what you can control, right? So developing some actionable steps, things that you can do that are in your reach. Practice adaptability. We do this all the time as humans. It can happen in dissertation as well. And then engage in collaborative problem solving, using your Zooms with your chair. That is an opportunity to problem solve in a collaborative manner. That is up to you how you gauge that. All right, so next activity. Leaders are going to start putting things in the chat. You see that comment up there at the top? Refine the alignment to strengthen the feasibility of the study. Huh? Just, huh? You ever have a comment or a whole bunch of comments and you're like, huh? What? What are you trying to say? So we're going to explore this just a little bit. Leaders should be starting to put questions in the chat now. What kind of questions would you ask if you saw that? And again, no perfect answers. Russell put a second probe up to help you kind of think about that a little bit more. All right, see, we're starting to engage. All right, good stuff, y'all. Rochelle put another probe for us. Donald gave us another probe just to think about it a little bit more. So the leader's questions in there can help you think through it. Well, you guys are doing good. Good stuff. Good job, y'all. Keep going. About another minute. Good job, y'all. All right. So I'm going to use this piece of vague feedback and kind of break down, because you guys have given some amazing things there. Gwen, I'm gonna take this one on here just based on what I'm seeing in the chat. So you get a comment and it literally just says, refine the alignment to strengthen the feasibility of the study. Well, you guys talked about breaking things down. first and foremost, analyzing means to break down, right? So looking at that particular piece of feedback, the first question I would ask myself, okay, what are we talking about when we talk about alignment? So if I understand alignment from its basic premise here at GCU, it's the 10 strategic points. It's your purpose statement, problem statement, research questions, right? Which design? How are you going to collect the data? Are you doing interviews? For those that are quantitative, are you using a particular instrument? Does that instrument actually measure the variable that you're actually looking to examine? Things like that. And if I start seeing anything in those core areas that look different, so some of you guys talked about the wording, right? Another person put in there talking about, can you get to the people that you need to get to collect your data? That's a feasibility piece, right? So if they say something about strengthening the feasibility of it, my head would start going into somehow my alignment and my feasibility is disconnected and they need to connect back. And if I don't understand how alignment connects to feasibility, you see what I just did? That's how I start asking questions. But I don't start just by rushing to my chair to ask a question. I'm going to give you guys something that I had to master, and I tell my undergraduate students, my graduate students, and my doctoral students. The question you ask begets the answer you will get. If you email me and you tell me, I don't understand, I'm going to email you back and I'm going to say, okay, one, clarify for me what you don't understand. Secondly, clarify for me what you do understand. Then I want you to tell me what you did to bridge that gap in your understanding. And the last piece, how can I help facilitate that? How can I support you in that? This is very key in doctoral education because doctoral education is not like K through 12 education. It's not like undergrad education. It's not like graduate level education. Doctoral education is pedagogical. And here's what I mean. K through 12 education is teacher-centered. The teacher tells the student what to do. The student goes and does it. And the teacher facilitates that understanding. And you move to higher ed, undergrad, graduate, then it becomes andragogical. But guess what? It's still very much teacher-centered. The only difference is that now as an adult, you're self-directed. So nobody's going to hold your hand and tell you what to go do. Doctoral education is different in that not only is it self-directed, it's independent and highly autonomous, meaning you should have the capacity to work on your own without somebody being there. So if you don't understand what alignment is, it is up to you as a student to go try to understand what alignment is first, and then come back to your chair with what you understand, what you don't understand, right? What you did to try to fill in that understanding and how your chair can support you in that regard. Otherwise, things will remain in an ambiguous state. And the longer it stays that way, the more frustrated you will get, the more doubtful you will get, the more anxious you will get. And so then you have this other part of you, your brain has two sides. It has an emotional side and a logical side. When the emotional side is taken over, logic is gone. All human beings are like this. Not a single one of us can overcome this. So the more emotional you are, logic is out of the door, right? So you get a comment like this and you're frustrated because you have been working on your alignment all of this time. You get an AQR. Now AQR says something about alignment, and immediately all these emotions rise up in yourself and about your committee, right? But in taking that step back, is taking a step back and saying, okay, what can I do? So I'm going to give you guys a real situation for me that happened in AQR at proposal. I had it in my head that I have access to all these chairs and students. So there's going to be no problem. I'm going to get my data. This was going to happen. And my reviewer came back and said, you're not accounting for attrition. Not only are you not accounting for attrition, you're not accounting for the fact that even though you may have this attrition, you have all these other factors associated with the attrition in your context. So what are you going to do if you run into this issue? What are you going to do to get the data that you need? Let's say, for example, you keep trying to get the data that you need over the course of months and you can't get it, meaning you've done everything you possibly can to get the number of participants that you can, and you still don't get where you need to get to. How are you going to overcome that? And I'll tell you where it was at. I had this brilliant idea that I was going to interview in pairs. I actually thought, y'all, that a chair and a student was going to sit together and be interviewed together. How? Feasibility. Right? So I had to tweak my core components, the alignment, so that it wasn't like I was going to interview these pairs. That's the alignment feasibility. You see what I just did? But I didn't recognize that that was an alignment issue or a feasibility issue. So the way the purpose statement, problem statement, research questions, they were worded, it had an and. Chairs and students. See it? Just that little piece, chairs and students, had to be tweaked in such a way where it didn't look like it was a pair, because it wasn't going to work. It was going to create a feasibility issue. And now I can go do individual interviews with chairs, individual interviews with students, and I could do focus groups with chairs in those groups and focus groups with students in those groups. But if I had not had an understanding of just wording the word and between two people groups, that's all it was. But I didn't quite understand it. I'm going to tell y'all what I did. I slammed my laptop top down, and I walked away from it frustrated because I had worked on that so many times, right? So that taking a step back from it, because for me, it didn't feel clear, it felt vague. I had all of this ambiguity going on, all of it. Linguistic in the sense that I didn't understand what I was being asked to do. Situational in the sense that I had been at it for like 4+ years and I was tired and I did not want to tweak the alignment anymore. I just didn't. I didn't want to do it. Like, I'm over it. Just get the alignment together. Cognitive in the sense that I don't understand. I just don't understand why this is an issue, right? And then navigating this in that my committee and I, we worked on this. And for us, it could happen, right? It very much could have happened, but the whole point of the reviewer coming in, if we back up, where did I go? Right here, right? Our whole job is to come in and help you, right? Make it better so that you can get to the finish line. So that is all that I have. Right on time. It's 1 after the hour, leaders. I did it. I'm testing myself. So I don't want to keep us around too long. So I see Russell unmuted, so I'll defer to you here, sir.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time, Dr. Johnson. And I'd like to take maybe a minute or two to see if any students have questions that you might be able to answer for them.
I'm looking now. I don't see anything. Would it be okay if they verbally ask the question?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Anything?
Just a thank you. I appreciate tonight's presentation. Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
You're very welcome, Superman.
I want to say thank you too. I appreciate the info. I have not, of course, gotten that far to be ready for level 2 yet, but you gave me much to think about and a lot of pointers. And I really, really appreciate it.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
I think one thing that I can say that I forgot to mention is that we're all looking at the same thing. Everybody is going by the rubric criteria, the learners, the committees, and us. And so if you're looking for that gap between us and you all, we're all on the same page. That is our common thread in everything. All right, Sarah, I'll see you. Now you know I'm a person behind all those comments. I'm real.
I'd just like to say something. First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. That was fantastic.
You're
But
welcome.
also providing those prompts forced all of us, but I speak for myself, to think about what was being asked there. Because so often in our emotional journey, we respond to our emotions, but sometimes I don't think it through. And when I'm forced to think it through, it settles me. And then I can go back and then handle whatever it is I was emotional about. So being forced to consistently think about stuff is critical. So thank you
You're
for that
very
exercise.
welcome. Keep going. I'm here.
Okay, before people run away, one thing I'd like to say is if you guys please put your email in the chat so that at least we'll be able to send out the information on the app to you guys. So if you don't mind, just put your email in the chat and we would appreciate that. I see people logging off. So before people log off, I wanted to say that. And then we wrap up when Dr. Johnson's finished. Any other questions before we wrap up with Dr. Johnson?
Diana has a question. I don't believe that this is going to go in DC. We're not at the point where we're posting things in DC, but the group may have some space already where they'll have things posted. So,
So I can respond to that. Right now, we are planning to use the app to give people access to a YouTube group that a private group that we're going to be having on YouTube. So you're going to need to have access to the app so that you'll have access to the recordings. That's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that you guys leave your emails with us so we can be able to send you so you can get access to our app.
any other questions? Anything?
Dr. Johnson, I had a question for you. I wanted to know, in your dissertation, was it a qualitative or a quantitative methodology?
It was qualitative, a qualitative case study. True story. I was the kid, I've moved bookshelves out, but I love calculus and algebra and all of that stuff. My favorite subjects. But if you start asking me to interpret statistics in words in a dissertation, my brain does not function like that. It just doesn't. In fact, when people have statistics on PowerPoints and in Excel spreadsheets, I am the person that drives the quant people crazy by asking, well, how? Well, why? So yeah, I was very much a qualitative case study.
Okay, you could say my question was that, and just now I'm in my DAT has been signed, and I'm waiting for the ProQuest process to complete. So when you were completing the AQR final, like the AQR 5, so when I was seeing the comments that they put in, like they said that just specify this or specify, there was something very minor that I had to do. I mean, luckily. So when people are sometimes asked to do something beyond what they've done, or there are more expectations. So is there any advice you'd want to give to the listeners, like all of us?
A good one. That's a good one. I'm going to say something that's going to make people emotional. You will be revising till the dean signs it. So
minus sign,
That
luckily.
is something that you don't like. Oh my goodness. So future Dr. Singay, congratulations on making
Thank
it.
you.
But yes, until the dean signs it off,
It-
I mean, down to getting into ProQuest. I was so tired and over it. I was like, I don't want to touch that anymore. And now I'm like, I should have touched that, but I was so tired and over it. So yeah, I would say my piece of advice would be just embrace it. You know what I mean? You're almost there. We know you're tired. Like we know you're tired, but just embrace it, because again, it's all these little pieces to ensure that when you go put it in ProQuest, you have put your absolute best foot forward, not things to hold you back. So I would guess I would say another piece of advice early on. I struggled with form and formatting. I still struggle with form and formatting. So if you can figure that type of stuff out a little bit earlier, you know what I mean, to ease your way through the end, I would say that. But I think just embrace the fact you're gonna be doing stuff till the dean signs it and after, because you got to get in ProQuest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you got to get over the you're used to being in this anxious state for multiple years. So you have to come down from that, and it takes a couple years. Look at Rochelle's face. It takes about 2 to 3 years, because you're consistently you constantly feel like you're supposed to be doing something. You're supposed to be changing something, and somebody's going to come back and ask you to do something. And even though you've graduated, you've been doing that for several years. So you're going to constantly have that feeling. And so future Dr. Singay, go be human as much as you possibly can afterwards. But yeah, it's real.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions, well, let's take this opportunity to again thank Dr. Johnson for a wonderful, thought-provoking presentation. And I would like to,
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'll see y'all Thursday.
right,
Or see y'all a little bit more Thursday.
and I would like to take this opportunity to ask the participants that are still on to share with your colleagues and your people that you know our group and what we're trying to do. One of the reasons we started this group is we realized that there is a major need for us to come together and as a collective try to help as many of us get to that finish line. And I can say personally, this group has been extremely helpful to me. When I've had these emotional reactions to the different things, I have friends within this group that I call and I say, "Can I scream?" And we know we have our screaming moment, and they let it work. So we have that among us, the camaraderie, and we're always looking for people like Dr. Singh, who now that you're at that stage, please reach out to us and continue to help those who are coming behind. We need every hand that we can get. So we're looking for people to come on board and work with us so that other students can know we're here to support each other through this process.
And if you have ideas in the comment section on your app, put it there so that we can build on that.
Yeah. And they will tell me, trust me.
And the thing is, what we're trying to get everyone to utilize the app, because when you utilize the app, again, the transfer of information is really smoother. So we're encouraging people to utilize the app. If you have questions or you're a little bit unsure, we're also here to help you get through the process of utilizing the app. The app can actually be on your phone or on your desktop. It can work either way. And we will be sending a lot of different things out. And as we get information that's changing, we're going to be working on keeping the information current so that when we give you information, it's going to be accurate and concise. Okay. So if anyone else has any other comments before we wrap up?
I want to say this on last week, which last Monday was a holiday, and I wasn't sure about getting online. And then I remember Rochelle said, oh, this line is always open. You can always get on. And so I did, and Russell was on, and he helped me one-on-one the whole time.
Wow.
And tremendous help to me. And I mean, just walking me through, showing me various sources and that I could utilize, because I felt stuck. I felt stuck last week, and he was a big blessing. And so I would just encourage anybody that you're new, get on, and they're available to help you one-on-one if you need that. And that's what happened last week. And I was so encouraged by the time I got off. So thank you again, Russell.
You're very welcome. So we're online every Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We encourage you guys, the same link that you have, you just click on the link, it's always open, and you can come on in and join us. We are online Mondays, every Monday, 7 to 9. But if you want to log on, it's all the line is going to be open.
And Donald is on video. Told you, Donald, when I love you, I mess with you. That's how it gets down. That's how it gets down, Donald. No, I'm happy to see you.
I'm glad to be here.
Well,
All right, y'all. As y'all see,
Russell's amazing, helping me get back on track. Shout out to
Yeah.
Russell.
yeah. All right, y'all. So I don't know if y'all see my head doing this because they have figured out that I'm still around. So I'm getting messages. All right, leaders. I'll see y'all Thursday. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Johnson.
You're welcome.
And if anyone
you.
else has any
Bye-bye.
questions for us, we are here to answer some questions before we wrap up.
I did put the link to the app in the chat if someone needs it.
Yeah.
And if you have access to the app and you haven't logged on in a while, please log in and see what we have up there, because we have been updating the information on a regular basis. And with Black History Month coming, we will be having some additional resources during Black History Month that you would want to pay attention to. And we're going to be pushing everything through the app. Okay. Well, if there's no further questions or anyone wants to say anything, we appreciate your time.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Folks.
Good night. Always good to see you, Mr.